Microbrands, are they worth it? Well, in today's video, I shall be discussing just that, along with more with my good friend here, Lincoln, who is a watchmaking student at Rolex and a Horological Society of New York scholarship recipient. First, I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi guys, my name is Lincoln, and I've been into watches for a few years now. I got into watches heavily when I was in high school. I think it was my junior year. I spent all my money on watches. All the money I made at my part-time job. 4 years later, I'm a watchmaking student.
First of all, I'm sure you all want to hear it. As a watchmaker, or at least a student watchmaker, what are Lincoln's favourite watch brands, and what is his favourite watch era?
My favorite brands, if I have to pick one, this might be controversial, but I think it'll have to be Rolex. It's not only the appearance of their watches, they make very distinct timepieces. It's also the engineering behind their watches. As a watchmaker, we really appreciate movements that are robust, well engineered, easy to service, and working with the school and Rolex in particular, I think anyone can see that they have a dedication to serviceability, repairability, and engineering timepieces that will last for generations. And some of my other favorite brands are, I have to say, Seiko. I am a huge quartz guy. I collect a lot of quartz watches. I love high accuracy quartz watches. I love some of the earlier quartz watches towards when the quartz crisis first began. I think the early 1970s was the best period for watchmaking possibly ever, aside from the current year, of course. And one of my favorite lines is Seiko Quartz Superior. They have brilliant case finishing. It's to the highest standard of that time, and it can even compete with modern watches. And you can pick them up for a couple $100. The value quartz watches bring, because they're less desirable when people are always looking for automatic. And when you do look at the theories, the theory behind how quartz watches work, they're also very interesting. But let's stay on topic, and I'll hand it back to...
Yeah, so I agree with Rolex. I think you can't really go wrong with Rolex as a pick. They are the industry leader. Well, they're not the industry leader. They are the industry in general for a reason. They're genius marketers. They have the most recognizable watches. Every watch brand on the planet has their own version of an Oyster bracelet and of a Jubilee bracelet. Although I think the Presidential is very more Rolex, high-end sort of thing. I don't see any other brands with that. And as well as that, I think that I agree with the whole quartz thing. Seiko modern, I'm not huge on their automatics. I think they're a little bit, not quite the value they used to be. But I do think that the 70s, after 1969 with the Seiko Astron and such, I think that they really were good quartz watches. Quartz Superior, incredible made watches. The robustness, the finishing, all incredible. And I know that with vintage, you might not think the finishing is as good, but generally that's because the watches from then are worn. If you get a new old stock Seiko Quartz Superior, it's probably going to give a modern Rolex a run for its money.
And I agree, Rudy. And with the Quartz Superiors, most of the times you don't even have to find a new stock one, because some of the cases are made out of hardened steel, and they keep their edges and the flatness of the surfaces incredibly well. And I have a few that still looks like they're brand new. They look new in stock, but they've clearly been worn. And that's one of the dedication to quartz from early on, because they were extremely high end.
Now, in recent times, microbrands are generally considered better value propositions than the big name brands. Brands like Maen with their Manhattan series, brands like Formex, brands like Christopher Ward, all of these more affordable watches, which are of quality on, at least what I know, level of Longines and Tudor, that sort of level of finishing and build quality for a fraction of the price. What do you think about that?
I think they're great. I love microbrands. In fact, I'm wearing my Maen Skymaster right now. It's one of my favorite pieces in my collection. Watchfinder edition in particular. I think they did a brilliant job with the smoky brown dial, and just the overall fit and finish of the watch is excellent. And I've owned many other microbrands before in the past. I had a Monta, I had a Formex. I had the Reef, but it was a Gen 1 without the swappable bezel. I mean, I have a Pittsman right now. I have a Precista. Zen. I don't really think you can call Zen a microbrand. Yeah, maybe I'll remember. Maybe I'll remember others. But I've been collecting for a while, and I've had my fair share.
And would you say that, at least in terms of value for money, these watches are better than the big name brand alternatives of the same price range? Let's say a Maen Manhattan, which is what, 700 quid. That's about the same price as a Powermatic 80 Tissot PRX, but I think that it's a much nicer integrated bracelet design with a better movement. What's your take on something like that?
It's difficult because I think they're really targeting two different audiences. But strictly speaking, to the watches themselves, I think the microbrands provide tremendous value compared to more established brands. Just the finishing, the case construction as well, and I mean, you don't even get like screw-on case back with the Tissot. It's, you know, as a watchmaker, it's really not as nice to work with. But you know, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker necessarily. If you're looking to purchase a mainstream brand, I think microbrands are just, by the way they operate, are just going to be inherently better quality for the money than the mainstream brands, because they don't have any dealers. They don't have to, there's no overhead. They don't have to own any factories or, you know, have really much customer support. And, you know, in that regard, you're losing some value in a different department, but it really depends on what you value, you know, in the end. Do you want like a better watch, or do you want, you know, what do you want to go into a store and pick something up? You know, I think they're really for people that aren't that into watches yet. You know, maybe some people graduate. I mean, I have a Tissot PRX as well. I wouldn't say it's my favorite piece, but it's quite solid. You know, it's not the worst thing you can buy for the price. And I enjoyed buying it from the store because I had a friend that worked there, and it was a good experience. I don't really think they're competing against each other.
I mean, yeah, that's a fair point. First of all, we have different collectors. I mean, there are people who care more about the brand name and prestige and history, and you also have people who care more about just the general quality and build quality and finishing and such of the watch itself. Value for money wise, of course, microbrands don't have things like middlemen, so they're not going to have all of these extra fees which make the general RRP at the end of the day be more. And as well as that, the higher end brands, or not the higher end brands, but the more well-known brands, the established brands, your Tissots, your Hamiltons, they have better customer experiences. You can actually go in a shop, you can try it on, you can see if you like it, you can talk with people about it. Whereas a microbrand, 99% of the time, you just have to see a picture and order it from the store and hope that you like it.
And I think microbrands, I think they cater to the more enthusiast crowd more, just like inherently, because, you know, because they're smaller companies, they're able to operate faster. I think some microbrands like Laurier really uses it to their advantage. They make frequent revisions of their popular models, and they take their customers' feedbacks and integrate it into the next, you know, iteration. Where I feel like you kind of see it with larger brands as well, like the Speedmaster getting a new bracelet and clasp, but the cycle is much slower. Whereas Laurier can make revisions, put out a new watch. Well, the same watch, but better next year. Seeing the evolution is a part of why I like these microbrands so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could see the more entry-level price range, let's say $1,000 and under, sort of going more in the microbrand range for people who actually are into their watches. Whereas, obviously, the bigger name brands are obviously more higher-end stuff. I could definitely see a future where, if you're a watch collector and a watch person, and I do think I already see it happening, if you have a budget that isn't at a high tier, if you can't afford something that's from a really, really good high-end brand, then I think that microbrands are probably a better option. I mean, what's your take on all of these Aliexpress Chinesian watches? You've got ones like San Martin, you've got MERKUR, you've got other ones like this, Pierre, Paulin, for example. What do you think about all of them? Because from what I've seen and from the three that I've handled, they're really good made watches for the prices of like 100 quid. But you're talking about being comparable finishing and just as good dials as something like a Tissot PRX. Of course, the movements won't be as good, but they do generally seem like a better value proposition.
Yeah, I agree. I've had many St. Martins as well. I've sold a few to my classmates actually, and quite a few of them bought St. Martins just on their own because they see how good the quality is. You know, we're all watchmaking students. You know, we have eyes. They're excellent. I think they set a very high bar for pretty much all watches that are within or close to the price range. I would say the Maen, I've got the Skymaster 38, the case, the bracelet, the dial is roughly the same quality as a St. Martin, but it's expensive because number one, the movement is expensive. It's top grade Solita, and I think just the movement itself will probably cost them like $300 to $400 to purchase, like on its own, which is it's not a small sum. And additionally, you also get Swiss assembly, which is also a point of value for these microbrand watches, since you get Chinese assembly with a Aliexpress or other Chinesium watches. Well, sometimes they aren't as good, and you're really paying for that extra layer of quality control.
And what do you think about the general designs? I mean, the AliExpress watches, I think, are made as well as things like Maen and other microbrands, but the other microbrands generally seem to have more of their own designs that are unique and, special to them, whereas a lot of these AliExpress brands are either reissues of old Chinese watches, which I think is perfectly fine, or a lot of them are homages, which I don't know if I'm too much a fan of.
That is a fair point. However, I do feel like the brands with more original designs tend to command more for the quality that they do bring, which is fair. You are spending more money, even though the build quality is the same. You are spending more money on these micro brands. A part of the price do go to the original design, and another part goes to the Swiss assembly. Sometimes Swiss movement. So, you have to decide on what is really worth. Is the original design worth the money, or would you rather have a homage of the same quality but for less? And also more responsive customer support with these micro brands. I've honestly had pretty great experiences with most of them I've dealt with, and I've also gone to shows. I've told what I don't like about their watches to the faces of the people that run the brands, and they genuinely be very receptive and nice. And I think another part of why the lower end is so fun is just the community aspect of it.
So I've got a question for you, and that would be, do you think that AliExpress watches and as well as that microbrand watches will generally take over the budget price range, the budget level of the industry in the future? Or do you think that the big brands still have a claim on that?
That is a great question. Personally, I rather detach from brand. If a watch is good, it's good. So I'm not very invested in that department. So watches are always getting better. Like even with the bigger brands, Seiko maybe not as much, but I do think the PRX, although I don't think it competes with Chinese watches and micro brands of the same price point, it's still quite a big step up for Tissot. I think it's a lot nicer than a lot of their previous releases. I think the finishing's better and the dial is pretty cool. I have a Mother Pro one myself, and I have to be honest, the pattern, they did a great job with it. It's very sharp, the squares, and it looks beautiful in the light. They are getting better. The fundamental problem with microbrands and AliExpress watches potentially becoming brands or mainstream brands like Seiko and Tissot is that when they do that, they're going to lose the competitive edge for price. When you add all of these extra networks that has to be supported, that's more money tacked onto the MSRP. When that happens, there will be no advantage to microbrands.
Yeah, I do also think that a good thing about microbrands, at least at the moment, is that they are sort of pushing the industry forward to evolve and making other brands, even bigger name brands, step their game up, because they're understanding, okay, a large portion of the actual watch fans, maybe not the general industry, the general people buying their watches, but the actual watch fans that will come back and buy watches again and again are moving on to micro brands from the bigger name brands. So I feel like they're upping their game, and it's causing everything in the industry to sort of level up a little bit.
I've seen some like very impressive improvements just within like maybe the past 2 or 3 years with the bigger brands. I think the new releases coming from Longines is excellent, and they're a huge step up from just the older models that are, you know, in the same line and fill the same role. Same can more or less be said about Tissot, and yeah, Seiko maybe not as much. You know, as much as I like the brand, but there's definitely improvement going on with the whole industry in terms of quality. And I think the time we live now is one of the heights of overall just the quality of watches that are being produced.
I've got to agree with you. I think the industry as a whole is doing really well. I also think that all of the micro brands existing is good because it gives a lot more options. There's a lot more variance. There's, you know, not every single person has one of 5 brands. They have one of 100.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it's also the community aspect of it. It drives engagement, and I think that's going to help the industry to really grow in the future.
All right, well, we're getting on to the end of the video now. It's been really lovely having you on and discussing. Everyone, this is Lincoln. We will be having him back on the channel regularly to discuss certain things or just to have a chat. Say hi to him in the comments. I will link in the description a few of his pages. I believe he has a Reddit that he posts on and such. So yeah, Lincoln.
Bye, guys. You know, looking forward to be on the channel again. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Rudy. And if you have any questions or want to discuss watches, you can reach me with my info in the description. Thank you.